The hum of the Deep Space Observatory filled the dimly lit control room, punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of data streams flowing across multiple screens. The flickering monitors cast a pale glow over Dr. Elena Raynor's face as she sipped her lukewarm coffee, eyes scanning the endless rows of spectral data. Tonight was supposed to be routine, another long shift of analyzing distant pulsars and cosmic background radiation. But something felt different. Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard as a new data stream rolled in. A strange, rhythmic pattern pulsed across the screen, unlike any cosmic signal she had seen before. She leaned in, frowning as she ran it through the standard filters. Not a pulsar, she muttered to herself, narrowing her eyes. Not a quasar, what are you? She adjusted the audio settings, and a low, faint whisper filled the room. It was barely perceptible, a sound like wind through trees, but layered beneath it was something else. A pattern. A voice? A shiver ran down her spine. No way. Just then, the door creaked open, and Dr. Michelson strolled in, rubbing his eyes. You pulling another all-nighter, Elena? He asked, stretching his arms with a yawn. At this rate, you're gonna fuse with that chair. Elena didn't take her eyes off the screen. Mike, come look at this. Michael ambled over, his casual demeanor shifting to curiosity as he focused on the waveform displayed on the main monitor. The whispering sound grew clearer when Elena tweaked the audio levels. What is that? Michael asked, leaning in. It's almost like speech. Elena nodded, excitement creeping into her voice. I ran it through all our known cosmic sources. It's not coming from a pulsar or a quasar. It's artificial. Michael's brow furrowed. Artificial? As in intelligence. Elena turned to him, her face pale but determined. It's coming from beyond the Oort Cloud. Michael's eyes widened, and he reached for the keyboard, running his own analysis. Beyond the Oort Cloud? That's... Exactly, Elena interrupted. It's not human. It can't be. A cold silence fell between them as the whispers grew louder, forming patterns that seemed almost recognizable, like the remnants of a forgotten language. Michael rubbed his chin. Has anyone else picked this up? Elena shook her head. Not yet. I checked. We might be the first. Michael ran a hand through his hair, suddenly alert. We need to report this. Before Elena could respond, the lights flickered. The entire control room shuddered, as if the building itself was reacting to the signal. A burst of static filled the airwaves, and the once steady waveform on the monitor pulsed erratically. The whispering sound deepened, almost like a growl. Then, the static cleared, and the screen flashed with symbols, unknown, cryptic, and seemingly alive. Elena's hands trembled over the keyboard. Michael, are we sure we should be listening? Michael hesitated, then shook his head. We've already started. The screen flickered again, and a single, ominous phrase appeared in an unknown language. It scrolled across the display slowly, deliberately. Elena instinctively reached for the comms, her voice shaky. Deep Space Command, this is Observatory 9. We've detected an anomalous signal originating beyond the Oort Cloud. Possible intelligent origin. No response. Only static. Michael stared at the monitor. It's like, it knows we're watching? Elena exhaled shakily. What if it's been watching us first? The radio crackled again, but this time, a low, resonant voice emerged through the static. It was deep, alien, and unmistakably intelligent. You have listened. The room went ice cold. Elena's hands flew to her mouth, while Michael staggered back, his face drained of color. The voice spoke again, this time with more clarity. You are not alone. Suddenly, every screen in the observatory went dark. The whispering sound faded into an ominous silence. Elena looked at Michael. What do we do now? Michael swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. I think we just made first contact. The cabin of Flight 217 was filled with the soft hum of the engines, but an eerie silence had settled over the passengers. The initial turbulence had jolted most of them awake, and now they sat with wide eyes and uneasy expressions, glancing around the dimly lit cabin. Flight attendant Lisa moved swiftly down the aisle, her warm smile doing little to ease the tension hanging in the air. Emily sat by the window, her hands gripping the armrest tightly. She had always been a nervous flyer, but tonight felt different. The strange glow outside had disappeared, but a lingering sense of unease remained. Beside her, Oort Carson, a seasoned traveler, adjusted his reading glasses and gave her a reassuring nod. "It's just turbulence, dear," he said, his voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. "Happens all the time." Emily forced a weak smile, but didn't loosen her grip. She peeked out the window again, expecting to see nothing but darkness. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. A shadow moved against the glass, just for a second, something that shouldn't have been there at 35,000 feet. "Did you see that?" Emily whispered, turning to Mr. Carson. He frowned, glancing out the window. "See what?" Before she could answer, the lights in the cabin flickered, plunging the passengers into momentary darkness. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Lisa's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, but everything is under control." Emily wasn't convinced. She could still feel it, the weight of something watching. The whispering sound had returned, soft and almost melodic, like distant voices carried on the wind. Other passengers began to notice it too, glancing around with wide eyes. In the row ahead, a young boy clutched his mother's hand. "Mommy, someone's outside," he said, pointing toward the window. His mother hushed him, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Emily swallowed hard and looked again. The shadow was gone, but the sense of foreboding remained. Suddenly, a thud echoed through the fuselage, sending a tremor down the length of the plane. The passengers tensed. Lisa, now visibly shaken, hurried toward the cockpit, whispering urgently into her handheld radio. Emily turned to Mr. Carson. "I think something's wrong," he sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Let's not jump to conclusions." Another thud, louder this time. The plane shuddered, and the overhead compartments rattled. Passengers murmured anxiously. Emily's breathing quickened, and her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be an electrical issue? Turbulence? Or something far worse? Lisa reappeared, her face pale but composed. She leaned toward Emily and Mr. Carson. "Are you two feeling all right? Any unusual sensations?" Emily stared at her. "Unusual? You mean besides the lights flickering and the weird noises?" Lisa hesitated. "Yes. Passengers are reporting strange things. Visions. Feelings of being watched. Have you experienced anything like that?" Emily's eyes widened. "Yes. There was something outside the window." Lisa nodded, her expression grave. "Try to stay calm. We're doing everything we can." With that, she moved down the aisle, checking on other passengers. Emily turned to Mr. Carson, whose face had gone pale. "You believe me now?" He nodded slowly, his hands trembling slightly. The whispering grew louder. It seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere at once, seeping into their ears, their thoughts. Emily covered her ears, but it did little to block out the eerie sound. A sudden, violent jolt sent drinks and personal items flying. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. Panic erupted in the cabin. Passengers screamed, and Lisa struggled to maintain order. Emily fumbled for her mask, but before she could secure it, the whispering shifted, becoming clear, coherent. A voice, deep and otherworldly, whispered directly into her mind. "You should not be here." Emily's eyes darted around the cabin. Faces blurred, movements slowed, and everything seemed surreal. The shadowy figure reappeared outside the window, closer this time. She gasped as she realized it wasn't just watching, it was trying to get inside. She turned to Mr. Carson, but his face was frozen in shock. "Emily, what is happening?" Suddenly, the whispering ceased. The lights returned to normal, the hum of the engines steady once more. Passengers looked around, dazed and confused, as if waking from a shared nightmare. Lisa's voice came over the intercom, shaky but reassuring. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the turbulence. The situation is under control, but Emily knew better. Something had come aboard Flight 217, and whatever it wasn't done with. The emergency sirens blared through the research station, their piercing wail slicing through the tense air. Dr. Elena Raynor and Dr. Michael Chen raced down the dimly lit corridors, their breathing ragged, adrenaline pumping through their veins. Agent Drake led the way, his gun drawn, every muscle in his body tense as they made their way to the command center. "We need to get to the communications room," Elena shouted over the alarms, clutching the tablet with the decoded messages tight against her chest. "We have to warn them before it's too late." Drake didn't respond. His eyes were fixed ahead, scanning the shadows that seemed to stretch and coil unnaturally. The once sterile white walls of the station now flickered with ominous red lights, casting ghostly silhouettes that danced with the haze seeping through the air vents. They reached the control room, slamming the heavy door shut behind them. Elena quickly locked it, her hands trembling. Michael collapsed into a chair, struggling to catch his breath. "We're trapped," he muttered, running a shaky hand through his hair. "They're out there, aren't they?" Drake pressed his ear to the door, listening intently. Faint whispers echoed through the steel, just like the ones they had first heard in the observatory. He stepped back, his face grim.
"Yeah," he said.
"They're here." Elena moved to the main console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The monitors flickered to life, displaying live feeds from the exterior cameras. The mist had fully engulfed the station, rolling like a living entity, and within it stood the tall, shadowy figures. They were closer now, their glowing eyes locked onto the building with unsettling intensity. "They're waiting for something," Michael whispered.
"What do they want?"
Elena stared at the screens, her heart pounding in her chest. The message, it said, "We have come." Maybe they're expecting a response. Drake shook his head. "We're not playing games with whatever those things are. We need to call for backup." Elena tapped into the station's satellite link, sending an urgent distress signal. The system processed it, and for a moment, hope flickered in her chest, until the screen went black, replaced by a single line of text. "No escape?" Michael pushed away from the console. "This isn't right. This is a nightmare." Drake cursed under his breath. "Plan B, then. We find another way out. Emergency tunnels lead to the secondary exit a mile from here." Elena hesitated, glancing back at the monitors. "If we leave now, we might lose our only chance to understand what they want." A sudden pounding on the door made them all jump. The whispers grew louder, the air thickening with an unnatural chill. The lights flickered, and the mist outside seemed to writhe in agitation. Drake raised his weapon. "We're not staying. Move." They followed him out, moving cautiously through the corridors. Elena felt the oppressive presence pressing in around them, unseen eyes watching their every step. Michael clutched his tablet like a lifeline, whispering equations under his breath, as if the logic of numbers could ward off the irrational terror creeping into his mind. They reached the emergency hatch. Drake punched in the code, and with a groan, the heavy steel door slid open to reveal a narrow tunnel stretching into darkness.
"Go," he ordered.
One by one, they crawled inside, the sounds of the station growing muffled behind them. Elena took a deep breath, the damp earthiness of the tunnel filling her lungs as she followed Michael and Drake through the tight space. The only sound was their rapid breathing and the distant echoes of the station's alarms fading away. Suddenly, a whisper, louder than before, filled the tunnel. It was no longer distant. It was here. "We see you." Elena's blood ran cold. She turned her head just in time to see a dark tendril of mist slithering through the entrance, curling toward them like a living thing. "Move," Drake barked, his voice laced with urgency. They scrambled forward, feet pounding against the steel grates. The mist surged behind them, and for the first time, they heard something more than whispers, an otherworldly shriek that echoed through the tunnel, vibrating through their bones. Michael tripped, falling hard onto his hands and knees. Elena grabbed his arm, pulling him up just as the mist licked at his heels. They burst through the far hatch, collapsing into the cold desert night. Drake sealed the door behind them, his chest heaving. "We can't outrun them forever," Michael gasped, staring back at the tunnel. Elena looked up at the star-filled sky, realization dawning in her mind. "We need to send the message from the old relay tower. It's not connected to the station's main systems. They won't be able to block it." Drake nodded.
Fine. But we move fast.
The trio sprinted across the barren landscape toward the rusting communications tower silhouetted against the moonlight. Elena's thoughts raced. What if they were already too late? What if the whispers had already spread beyond this place? Reaching the base of the tower, Elena climbed the rusted ladder, her fingers trembling with cold and fear. She plugged her tablet into the ancient console, tapping furiously. "Come on, come on." Suddenly, the whispers were back, louder, filling the air around them. "We are here." Elena screamed as the mist surged toward them, coiling like a serpent. Drake fired his weapon into the void, but the bullets passed through harmlessly. Michael grabbed Elena's shoulder. "Send it now." She pressed the final command, and the screen displayed, "Transmission sent." As the signal pulsed into the void, the mist recoiled violently, and the figures within it howled in anguish. They began to dissipate, retreating back into the night. The oppressive weight in the air lifted. Elena collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Did it work? Michael scanned the sky. "They're gone for now." Drake exhaled sharply. "We need to get out of here." As they made their way back toward the road, Elena cast one final glance at the station in the distance, now dark and lifeless. The whispers may have gone silent for now, but she knew deep down, this was only the beginning.